You know, life is full of distractions, noise, chaos. And for most of us, the first thing we hear in the morning is the digital abomination of an alarm clock ripping us from our dreams and rest. And then we spend the rest of the day being assaulted by email and text messages and Facebook notifications. And our gadgets tell us when to stand up, when to breathe, how many steps to take in a day. When are we ever still? When is there a moment when someone or something isn't controlling our mind? Where can we find a moment of peace? It seems like it gets harder all the time to find somewhere where we can have a quiet conversation with a friend or with a family member. I mean, you're there and you're trying to look in their eyes, you're trying to hear what they're saying, but there's screens everywhere pulling us into images of glamour and war, and sensuality and consumerism, terror and chaos. Sometimes it feels like a personal attack invading our most personal spaces. Like if I'm in a meeting and someone is clicking their pen, it's like with each click of the pen, they're clearing my mind and filling me with rage. Or the lady who's sitting behind me and she takes a piece of candy from her purse and she opens it so slow. And the crinkle of the plastic wrapper, it's like a black ops psychological torture technique from hell. It seems like the whole earth has become a hellscape with no hope of ever seeing heaven, if there even really is a heaven. And then when I lay down in my bed at night, and I'm worn out and my mind is just buzzing from all the annoying distractions of the day. I mean, I lay there and I imagine that I can see through the ceiling, past the trees, beyond the clouds, and directly into the heavens, like billions of stars and planets, just vast and amazing, all hovering infinitely in every direction. And then I'm like this little microscopic speck in my bed on a tiny blue planet. But I know if I actually went outside, the stars that are supposed to be big and bright, they wouldn't be visible at all in Houston, Texas, because of the haze and the white noise and the light pollution. Every day is so filled with distractions and chaos. It kind of seems impossible to find a single moment of stillness and quiet or peace. Let's pray as we get started this morning. Father in heaven, we ask that you would open your word to us this morning. Help us to see Jesus. Challenge us on how we're to serve you. And also comfort us with your promise of forgiveness and salvation. And we pray that you would give us hope for a future that is beyond the pain and the chaos of this world. Amen. So the text this morning is from the Gospel of Mark, starting with chapter 4, verse 35. It says, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat, and they started out, and they were leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon, a fierce storm came up, and high waves were breaking into the boat. It began to fill with water, And Jesus, he was sleeping in the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. And the disciples, they woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" And when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind, and he said to the waves, "Silence, be still." And suddenly the wind stopped. There was a great calm. And then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And the disciples were absolutely terrified. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." So Jesus had been teaching the multitudes of people. He'd been healing them, casting out demons, hanging out with self-righteous religious people who just wanted to argue about everything, hanging out with desperate sinners who were at the end of the line. And it seems like he was tired, like he needed to get away from it all for a while. So he gathers up the 12 disciples and he says, "Hey, let's get the boat and let's get out of here. Let's go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee." So they get in the boat and Jesus finds a pillow and he goes to sleep. Now Jesus was wanting to get away from the crowd. And that was the whole point of going to the other side. But a bunch of the people, they just couldn't take a hint. So they also got in boats and they started following him. They were like, "Hey boys, Jesus is trying to get away. Let's follow him and see if we can annoy him on the other side of the lake." Yeah, how about no? So I don't think it's that much of a surprise that suddenly a violent storm came up and forced the clingy hanger-oners to go back to shore and leave Jesus alone. Sometimes I wish I could just summon a little storm, like out of thin air, when someone is close talking and going on and on with the one story after another, and there's no end in sight. I mean, just a little magic storm, just enough to like push them back a bit so I could make an escape. I'm sure you've never felt that way because you're a good person who likes to listen to people tell mind-numbing stories about things you couldn't possibly care anything about. You're a much better person than me. But I do take some comfort in the fact that even Jesus needed a break now and then. And when the grippers tried to follow him anyway, storm. But the disciples were freaking out. I mean, they were all about trusting Jesus' maritime wisdom for when to go sailing and whatnot, but this wasn't looking too good. I mean, he just got in the boat and went to sleep. The wind is raging. The sea is throwing the little boat all over the place. I mean, there's thunder and lightning. They can't hear, they can't see, and Jesus is taking a nap. So they start shrieking like little girls. "Teacher, teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown? OMG, like you just totally brought us out here to die and everything. Gah." I'm pretty sure that's not the most pleasant way to be woken up. So Jesus sits up and he rebukes the wind and he says, "Be still. Shut up." The text says he was talking to the wind and the sea and the waves, but I think he was talking to the disciples too. Shut up. And everything got real quiet then. The storm stopped, the disciples were silent, and Jesus just looks at them and he says, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Why are you being such babies? Don't you know who I am? Jeez." See, they had been afraid of the storm and of drowning, but that wasn't anything compared to the fact of what they were feeling now in this silence. They were afraid of the chaos that surrounded their little boat. But now they were face to face with someone who commanded the wind and the sea. They were trapped in a little boat with a person who could control chaos. And he was asking them some pretty pointed questions. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? And the disciples were like, who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him? Now, the Gospel of Mark, it doesn't provide an answer in this scene, but we know who he is, don't we? This is Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the creator and sustainer of the world, the one who is victorious over chaos and fear and death. You know, it's interesting that they went from being afraid of the storm to being terrified of the one who calmed the storm. And the words that Jesus uses when he rebukes the sea, they echo the words from Psalm 46, which we read earlier in the service. See, in this psalm, we hear about how God was our refuge and our strength, always ready to help us in times of trouble. Martin Luther, he based the lyrics to the hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," on Psalm 46, which talks about how we don't have to fear no matter what chaos surrounds us. Though the sea roars and foams, though the earth quakes and the mountains tremble, though the nations rage and kingdoms crumble. The psalm has images of war, natural disaster, violence, and terror. But God simply speaks and puts an end to all the chaos. Be still and know that I am God. Shut up and remember who your God is. See, every day we turn on the news and there's trouble in the world. There's chaos everywhere we look. Storms and war and people hurting each other. I mean, it would be terrifying if we weren't so numb to it all. Most of the time, we're just mildly relieved that any particular awful thing didn't happen to us. I mean, at least not today. Did you see the news? Man, poor guy. Sure glad that didn't happen to me. And I think we have to be a little numb towards it all because it's so relentless. It never stops. There's always someone setting off a bomb. There's always some madman with a gun trying to kill everyone. There's always a hurricane or a tornado or a tsunami or a new virus or a cancer or some impending doom. And we're all in this little rowboat. We're just trying to get away from the noise. But it follows us and it surrounds us. I mean, sometimes something hits home and it breaks through our apathy. And we do really freak out. And then when that happens, we all pretty much think the same thing. God must be asleep. I mean, he must be asleep or else he doesn't care. He either doesn't care or he's just not paying attention. And some people, they get so mad at God for allowing all the terrible things to happen that they give up on the idea of him like altogether. I mean, he must not exist at all. How can we believe and trust in a God who seems to be asleep while chaos and trouble rage all around us? You know what it's called when a natural disaster wipes out a city filled with men, women, and children? You know what that's called, right? It's called an act of God. You know what it's called when a person decides who's going to live and who's going to die? Well, if they're a doctor, it's called a God complex. And if they're a serial murderer, it's called playing God. You know, sometimes it seems like we don't think too highly of our Maker. And the demons click their pens and open their candy wrappers, keeping us distracted with images of glamour and war and sensuality and chaos. But what are the things that stir up anger in your heart? What are you afraid of? What really causes you to doubt? Regardless of what the disciples thought about God, he wasn't far away. He wasn't unconcerned with the wind and the waves and the storm. He wasn't unconcerned with what they were going through. I mean, not at all, because he was in the boat with them. He was in the storm too. He was being thrown around, getting soaked by the rain, the water coming into the boat, just like they were. The eternal Son of God, creator and sustainer of the universe, was in the same boat they were. It's the whole point of the gospel that Mark is telling, that God the Father sent God the Son into the created world to become a man, a human, someone who would experience all the same temptations, terrors, pain, suffering, storms, exhaustion, and chaos that all of us have to suffer in this fallen and broken world. The disciples were scared out of their minds because a sudden storm was rocking their world, and they felt like God was far away. So they were letting their minds be filled with fear and doubt. They were pretty sure they were going to die. And they certainly didn't understand why Jesus was just sleeping through the whole thing. Why wasn't he concerned that there was danger? Well, Jesus gets up and he echoes the words from Psalm 46. Be still and know that I am God. See, God wasn't far away. He wasn't unconcerned. God was right there in the boat with them, and his name is Jesus. He spoke, and chaos became silent. And they weren't afraid of what was outside the boat anymore. Now they were terrified of who was in the boat with them. But you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not. Proverbs 9:10, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So there it is. Jesus is God who commands the wind and the waves. Jesus is God. The same God that's a mighty fortress, an ever-present help in our time of need. The one who said, peace, be still, to calm the storm, is the same one who said, be still and know that I am God. Jesus is God who quiets all chaos. And he doesn't do it from some faraway place in the heavens where we can't see him because of all the noise and the light pollution and the distractions. No, he's in the same boat we are. He's here. He came to earth. He lived a life filled with the same mind-numbing, day-to-day suffering that we have to deal with. He was worn out and weary, just like we are, except he didn't sin. He didn't lose faith. He carried our fear and our doubt and our sin, and he took it all on himself. He was wounded for us, bruised for us, beaten for us, and he died for us. See, he went to the center of the storm. Jesus went to the cross, and he died to forgive all of us for our sin and our doubt and our faithlessness. He went to the center of death and hell itself. And he did this for all of us. For every time that we've gotten scared and wondered if God was asleep or unconcerned. And then he rose from the dead in triumph, which began a shock wave that has reverberated throughout all time and reality. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is a cataclysmic event that will ultimately silence all the chaos, all the violence, all the war, all the distractions that keep us from knowing peace. And it's not a theoretical, once upon a time in a Bible story far, far away concept. Because I'm talking to all of you, all of us, when I say, be still and know that Jesus is God. Shut up and know that Jesus is God. He's not asleep. He's not unconcerned. He's well aware of the chaos that surrounds you. He's well aware of your fear and your doubt and your lack of faith. Be still and know that Jesus is God, your God. He came to bring you peace and forgiveness and to quiet the chaos assaulting you from every direction. Do you feel overwhelmed, distracted, angry, afraid, helpless? Well, Jesus came to the same world that you live in, and he came to offer you hope and peace. Peace, be still. Chaos, be still. Distractions, be quiet. Shut up and know that I am God. I really hope you guys can let that sink in, that God is truly concerned with your trouble, that he's here with you in the midst of all this chaos, and you can be still and trust in him. And you might not see a change. You might not see it. You might not feel it. You may still be surrounded by all kinds of trouble. But you can trust in the God who is our refuge and strength, our very present help in time of need. See, there's going to be trouble. I mean, let the oceans roar, let the earth tremble. But don't fear the chaos that surrounds you. Instead, trust in Jesus, who came to suffer with us and for us, and who will one day bring an everlasting peace and an end to all the chaos. Instead of taking all the distraction and chaos of this world as a personal attack on your life, realize that Jesus came into this world personally to rescue you. You, me, all of us. He's with us. He hears us. When we call on him, he'll help us through all the day-to-day catastrophes that we face. He helps us. He gives us strength and patience to endure. But guys, we still live in a world full of trouble. That's why we need hope. So for now, we hold on to this hope. We hold on to it by faith, trusting that all the momentary distractions of this world will one day fade away, and we'll see the heavens in all of their glory when God is fully revealed to us in perfect splendor. And there will be peace. And we will be still, and we will know that Jesus is God. So, when the digital abomination of an alarm clock rips us from our dreams, see, the heart of faith, it may groan. but it will remember that Christ, too, was often ripped from his rest. He's been weary, and yet he remained faithful. When we're assaulted by email and text messages and the needy madness of Facebook notifications. See, the heart of faith, it may feel overwhelmed, but it will remember that Christ, too, was pressed by the crowds who wanted more and more. He's been used by people, and yet he remained faithful. When the pens are being clicked and the candy wrappers are being crinkled, sure, the heart of faith may be irritated, but it will remember that Christ, too, has suffered all the little pains and annoyances that this world has to offer. He's been angry, but he still remained faithful. And when the heart of faith sees another news story about war and death and sickness, madness, it is tempted to be afraid and to worry. But we're going to remember, we will remember that Christ too has felt the chaos and distraction, the wind and the waves, and he came to silence them. And he will come again. And when he does, they're going to remain silent. This is our great hope. So until that day, be encouraged. Be encouraged. Remember that Jesus is God. He's not asleep, and he is concerned with our every trouble. We don't fear the world, but instead we trust in our God so that we can have peace now. Peace. Be still. Amen.
For more information, go to newchurchtexas.com or email frank@frankhart.com.